Okay. Stand by for systems. Okay, Steve. Okay, you got that. Someone.
More than 30 years after the last victim was found.
The New Bedford highway murders terrorized the South Coast back in the 80s. And as chief investigator, Cheryl Fiandato reports one victim's family believes the case is one tip away from being solved.
There are new developments in a case that terrorized the central U.S. for decades. Investigators believe the BTK killer may have had more victims than we first knew. Emily Akena now and what they found in his backyard this week.
Hey! You want to get... Hey! Hey! 43! 43! Hey! Put your hands up! Put your hands up! Get on the ground! Hey, got one in the back! One in the back! I swear to God! Maxie, you move your hands up! Black pants coming down the hill! Got you on foot! Go downstairs! That's the problem. Y'all want to come down the ramp. I'm going to tell you, get off you, boy! Coming down the ramp. Gray sweatshirt, black pants, mask on. Guy just jumped down. Hey, he just jumped down.
Yeah, we will. What have you been arrested for? You ever been arrested before?
Danny, where's your car?
Never been arrested before in LA?
Fourth was down.
How long ago? Sit up. How long ago? What's your name?
Suspected serial killer who has had an entire city frozen in fear. Wesley Brownlee was arrested just after 2 a.m. Saturday near his Stockton home.
Tonight in Moscow, Idaho, Brian Koberger, the man charged with stabbing 4 college students to death, now indicted by a grand jury.
It would have made a frightening Hitchcock thriller if the crimes hadn't been real. A killer was stalking Boston women, raping and strangling them. In the most grotesque manner, he would display his work, and he always left a bizarre calling card, a nylon tied in a granny knot around the neck of each victim.
Good evening. Welcome to 22 News at 11. An intriguing development tonight concerning the search for the killer of Molly Bish.
Understandably, security is extremely tight here at the Pensacola City Jail. On the second floor of this building, Ted Bundy is under constant guard. Authorities are very well aware of the fact that Bundy has twice escaped from jail, and now that they know who he is, they are not about to let him slip away again. When he was arrested shortly after midnight on Wednesday, he was just considered a belligerent speeder. He fought with arresting officer David Lee when Lee stopped him for speeding. Only late last night, following FBI fingerprint identification, did Pensacola police learn they had captured one of the most wanted and, according to the FBI, most dangerous criminals in the country.
On the evening of February 9th, 2004, almost 18 years ago, Maura Murray crashed her car on Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire, never to be seen again.
I can't. Negative. I can't say. All I can say is this man needed help. This man seemed like a man who was coming up to a storm or to a climax. This very blood-curdling thing at one of the cutoffs where he said, children kill, and then sort of an agonized cutoff, enough to turn your hair whiter than mine.
So inside the thrift shop, St. Vincent de Paul, attorney Melvin Belli and the San Francisco police waited for the Zodiac killer.
It's not, Devin.
We're going to have a great time together.
It may be the creepiest episode ever on The Dating Game, because this bachelor looking for love back in 1978 is actually a serial killer.
This afternoon, out of Myler has more now at noon from Shirley.
Well, it is a case that has never gone cold for the family of Holly Peranian, who would have turned 40 years old last month. Among items found in the area of Brimfield, where Holly's remains were uncovered back in October of 1993. Take a closer look at it, with a very distinguishing color and Boston logo. Within the past 6 months, further forensic testing has been done thanks to advances in testing procedures. Investigators want some very specific information related to it, and Holly Peranian's family hopes to finally have some closure.
And were found brutally murdered in this college house. According to court documents, Kohberger's DNA was found on a knife sheath at the crime scene, and his white Hyundai Elantra seen driving here during a routine traffic stop.
His first victim was Anna Slessers, a 55-year-old divorcee, brutally beaten and strangled while a parade passed down her Back Bay Street. From June 1962 until January 1964, 10 more women would die the same way.
Believes he may have uncovered evidence that could lead to Molly's murderer. A lengthy article in the Worcester Telegram chronicles a custody investigation that ended with Gerald Battistoni serving up to 12 years for raping his girlfriend's daughter.
The former Tacoma and Seattle resident is a suspect in 36 sex killings in Colorado, Utah, Oregon, and Washington. And now he is being questioned in connection with 2 murders at a sorority house at Florida State University in Tallahassee.
As officials announce a suspect is now in custody. Multiple news outlets now reporting the suspect is 59-year-old Rex Heuerman of Massapequa Park.
Let's get off the district. Let's put out 30 seconds last round. Roger. 008, hold us heading. I'm in the King 004. How does that look? Looks good, Steve, and all systems are okay here. The winds are westerly and 10 knots. Okay, this is NASA 1 calling 10 seconds now. 10 seconds, roger. 0, 5, 4, 3, 2. I've got a blowout. Vapor 3. Pitch to 0. Pitches out. I can't hold altitude. Correction, Alpha 4. So I'm trying to collect it emergently. Flight calm, I can't hold it. She's breaking up. She's breaking.
We're very excited to have with us true crime author and anthology editor Mitzi Szereto. You get a great sense of her unique take on the genre by glancing at some of the titles. Crimes of Passion, Obsession, and Revenge. Well-Mannered Crooks, Rogues and Criminals. Getting Even, Revenge Stories. Her upcoming book is Women Who Kill. She also writes fiction and suspense, even erotica. You can find her on all the relevant social media and on her website, which we've linked to below. So let me bring on Mitzi, our very special guest. Hi, Mitzi.
Hi.
Thank you very much for being here. And I also want to bring on our regular co-host, Erin. We call her Dubs. And so this is your chance to meet her. Hi.
Hi. Hi, JJ.
So thank you, you've run the whole gamut in true crime. Just looking through the incredible diversity of your tales, you've managed to come up with a unique take on true crime. What would you say first drew you into true crime?
Is that for me?
Yeah.
I don't know why the video looks very laggy to me. Does it look that bad to you?
So far, so good. You never know. Here on Yellow Cottage Tales, we do have technical difficulties, or at least with the internet from time to time.
Well, I got into true crime by accident, which I know that sounds a bit strange, but I mean, I've done nonfiction in the past and I've done crime fiction in the past, but I was actually chatting with a publisher who I had worked with at another publishing house, and she'd gone to a different house, and we were talking about some possible ideas, and she expressed a lot of interest in true crime. And I'm always up for something new and up for a challenge, and basically what started it out back in 2019 with the Best New True Crime Stories series, which the 7th book has just come out last spring. So, and then another true crime book is coming out in this February, but it's not part of the series. So yeah, I just got kind of sucked into it, dragged down this rabbit hole, and that's it.
Yeah, in a little bit, I'm going to put, actually, I made a little video that's a compilation of your book covers, and you're going to go over a story in particular, and I managed to find a video of that rock brand, and I'll bring that up too. Erin is just so you're our special guest. Erin is a co-host here, so that's why she's on with us. And we have another regular that's usually a co-host with us, Dave, who is also an author, but he is terribly sick today, so he won't be able to make it. But he's very familiar with your work.
Okay. Yeah, I checked him out when you mentioned he was going to be on with me. I noticed his book sort of parallels the theme that is the story I wrote about for the book.
Very, very much so. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So we want to get your insights even just into, when we get to that story, but I'm definitely interested, and it's very similar to a lot of the things that we've covered. And also, both me and Erin, we kind of similar paths to you in that we're interested in true crime, but we're also maybe started out more in fiction, and then at some point segued into true crime. It sounds like maybe that's what happened with you too.
Yeah, well, I haven't abandoned fiction. I mean, I'm actually working on a novel, a poor novel that keeps getting put on the shelf because I keep getting more true crime anthologies to do. But yeah, I mean, I think once you have the skills and everything, and even though true crime is supposed to be true, you do want it to be engaging. So I think that's where your fiction writing skills come into play, because you're always aware that you are writing for someone, for an audience, and you have to keep them interested in what you're writing about. You don't want it to be dry and boring. You don't want people to fall asleep.
So in your, I want to just ask one more question, and then we'll let Erin dig in. In your experience of looking into true crime, do you look at it more as just you're researching a topic and trying to write a good story? Are you also involved in any investigative aspects of any of this stuff?
I know a lot of true crime writers are investigators, and they really get their teeth into something and they go with it. I'm a little more removed from that, which is not to say that I haven't done some investigative work. I mean, there was a piece that I did in the Best New True Crime Stories, Small Towns, about a shooter. One of these random, he just went off one day and started shooting a whole bunch of people. And in that particular story, I did do a lot more in-depth stuff. I was fortunate that a friend of mine who was with the retired police captain knew several of the police officers who worked the case. So I was able to reach out to them and dig more into this story. But as a general rule, no, it's more research oriented. And then I just weave everything together and try to put an interesting spin on the story, bring in other elements and that sort of thing.
Nice. That's awesome.
Do you get any tips coming in, or people requesting help with any of this stuff? Or
Oh, I do get emails from people sending me stories, sending me all kinds of things that, they want their story heard. I guess, they're just people who have been failed by the justice system. And, that's really not what I do. And I have to tell them, in all honesty, that's just, you're kind of barking up the wrong tree in this regard. So, I mean, I feel bad because some of these things are pretty awful. And you sort of think, well, you wish you could do something to help them. But if I went and wrote a book following every single person who emails me, it'd be impossible.
Yeah. And some of these people are actually, they're not just looking for, here's a good idea, but they're more
justice.
Yeah, they're looking for justice. And we get contacted by a lot of family members that the case has been forgotten, and they want to get, they want their family member to be remembered, especially if it's unsolved.
Well, in a lot of these cases, though, I get contacted by people where there hasn't been any resolution. There hasn't been any kind of a court hearing or a court case. And, I have to watch myself, too. We we have to watch our legal backsides here. And you know, I'm certainly not going to go off on a tangent just on one person's say so and end up, you know, being sued.
Right. So why don't we get to your story? This is the one that was in the most recent one. This is your contribution to the anthology, The Best New True Crime Stories. These are crimes of famous and infamous criminals. And so this is your story called The Devil's Prophet. Why don't we get into that?
That's a bit of a play on the band name, which is Lost Prophets, one word. You got Ian. That's Ian Watkins, lead singer of Lost Prophets, disgraced lead singer of Lost Prophets. And I actually found out about this case by accident. I used to listen to this band in the UK. I mean, they had worldwide fame, but the UK is really where they were the most known and loved. It's a band from Wales, and Ian Watkins, as you see, the lead singers from the Welsh Valleys, and you know, he came up through the ranks like a lot of musicians do. You know, you start out in high school, you play with bands, you form a new band, you go on and form another band, you break that band up, you get to the next band. So, you know, everything looked great for this guy. You know, he was at the top of his game. The band was doing fantastic. I mean, they had silver, gold, and platinum albums. They were winning awards. Everybody loved them. And, you know, when you're the lead singer of a band and you're young and you're cute, yeah, you don't have a problem getting women. I mean, if you're straight, obviously, getting women and you know, taking what's on offer. But even though Ian did take some of what was on offer, he had different interests, and this is where things get very dark. Unfortunately, his interests were not just with young women or young girls, but he was interested in infants and children. And it's this, I've said in an interview before with a television station that he's probably one of the most heinous people I've ever come across in true crime, and I stand by that.
It's just amazing because, you know, we've seen obviously in the true crime world a lot of monsters that are obsessed with young children, but to be obsessed with infants, I don't think I've seen that before.
Yeah. Well, also, you know, what's interesting, I mean, being a young man as he was, you know, in his 20s, I mean, I don't know. I think I'm not sure, you know, how accurate this is, but we sort of have an impression of like child molesters or whatever you want to call them, pedophiles, that they're sort of like these dodgy older guys, you know, dirty old men and dodgy old men and, you know, just, I don't know, something's just happened to these men over the years. But I mean, this is a young guy, and he was actually living the rock star life. He had some high profile girlfriends, you know, that people from television and the fashion world. So, you know, this was a real shock to everybody, including his band members, that his interests lay elsewhere. But, you know, it all seems as if it started, and I can't guarantee this because, you know, most pedophiles, there usually is a history going back to at least adolescence. And we obviously don't seem to know that. And as far as my research has yielded the results of my research, I couldn't find anything about any kind of allegations that came forth later on about maybe, you know, he was molesting someone as a teen or as a young boy. But he started to get very heavily into drugs. And this is rather odd because the band had a very clean image when they started out. You know, they weren't into that whole rock and roll, drugs and alcohol, you know, booze and everything lifestyle. They had a very straight image. And but around 2007, I think it was, let me see. Yeah, around 2007, Ian just started to get into crystal meth and cocaine, crack cocaine especially. And he's just was using more and more and more of it, which did affect his relationship with his band members and his performances on stage, even to the point where, you know, he got into a fight with one of his band members who smashed him in the head with a can of energy drink because they just had enough of this guy. So it's as if everything, maybe the drugs just sort of brought this out more in him, because it's sort of, it could just, these kind of drugs are just, they're pretty heavy duty drugs. And that seems to be when he really got into it. But, he started out doing things like, he was like going to these websites, and he was even uploading videos of himself in extreme sex acts, really far out stuff. And the irony is, like, he had profiles, and he had a profile on some dodgy website, and it had been looked at by like 40,000 people, and no one ever said anything about it.
It's just amazing, and so he was getting these young adult women to voluntarily use their, I'm basing this just from reading your story, to voluntarily use their infant children to, what exactly would they do?
Well, that's the thing. He actually, when the court case came up, and he finally pled guilty, and I have to say that he denied it for quite some time, despite the amount of evidence against him, he claimed he was being framed by some fanatical, crazed fan, because all this stuff was found during a random drug bust. They found like, they found videos, they found images. He even had like cloud accounts. He encrypted things. He was quite savvy when it came to this. But there were two women in particular that he got involved with, and they were fans. And obviously, like I said, he's a young rock star, and he's going to have fans. But he had what was being dubbed super fans, for instance, fans who would do anything for him. And I mean, this kind of goes to an extreme, more so than you hear about in the usual rock star kind of, lifestyle. So there were two particular women, grown women, mind you. These were not children. These were not teenagers. These were adult women. And both of them had infants. One had an infant daughter. I believe she was, I just made scribble some notes down because I can't remember everything. Let me see. There was a baby boy who was 10 months old, and then there was a baby girl. So these were the two women that he was cultivating the most. And they considered themselves in a relationship with Ian. And I mean, I suppose they were. He just sucked them into this, and it ended up like they were doing things like Skyping, and they would be like molesting the infant on Skype, the mother involved, I should say. It wasn't, so Ian would be watching the mother molesting the child. Then one of them he actually got hold of, and ultimately these women were also tried and sentenced along with him. However, they were considered to have been groomed. And because of that, they had anonymity as far as their identities, because in the UK, they would be granted that kind of anonymity. And that caused a whole other bunch of fuss, because a lot of people just thought that didn't sit well with them.
Without getting into anything too sensitive, definitely not anything gruesome, but were the children being harmed? Were they being hurt, cause pain, that kind of thing? Or was it just...
Well, I actually did read some of the actual court documents, and I didn't really go into the detail in the story, because I just, there's kind of a balancing act of how much you're put in. And then, of course, when it's children or infants, that pushes even more buttons. But to say they were being hurt, not really, but whatever was done, what was done to them was certainly not, this was not normal activity that you do to an infant. It was definitely sexual. It was definitely exploitive. God forbid, let's hope these infants never have any kind of weird memories coming back from that. I mean, I would think not at that age, but who's to say?
Yeah. I wonder how,
especially having their own mothers involved,
it's unbelievable that the power of wanting to impress one powerful person, could be, a rock star, cult leader, that kind of thing, where you're willing to do that with your own child.
Well, supposedly these women fancied themselves in love with him, and he played on that because he was apparently quite a good manipulator. I mean, you'd have to be, wouldn't you? So he took advantage of that, and I mean, but I mean, he dehumanized the infants. I mean, there was like. One of the infants, he'd actually told the mother, like, that they want to actually have it where the infant's going to know it's not loved. I mean, that's pretty bizarre.
Yeah. It's definitely, we see all different kinds of, we try to get into the heads of what some of these killers, and he's not a killer in this case, but some of these monsters, what makes them tick. And it's, in some cases, it's just too bizarre, I guess, to even really get there.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly don't know how we could find any type of rationale for what he did, because I mean, from what I found, he had a normal upbringing, nice parents. There was just nothing that indicated he'd be going in this direction. I mean, everybody was totally stunned, and a lot, like I said about the band members, they were stunned too, and they got a lot of negativity thrown at them too, because it's always that thing, like, for instance, when you're married to, say, a murderer or a serial killer, and they say, well, how did you not know? You must have suspected. They actually didn't know, because they weren't spending, they weren't living in his pocket, and he wasn't living in theirs. I mean, they didn't see him maybe 9 months out of a year. They didn't see this guy. And as things progressed, Ian became a bit more closed off. Like, there was a mention by one of the band members that instead of everybody being like, when they would go to a gig and everyone's in the same, limo or whatever, he'd go off in his own, he'd go in his own limo. He wouldn't share with them, like he was like hiding something or whatever. But obviously they never suspected anything like this. They just figured it was the drugs making them a bit more annoying.
Right. And our regular partner, you looked up his book, Dave McGrath. So he's here in spirit and he's watching the show. He just couldn't get on and talk, but he's saying now he used to work as a correctional officer. And one of his inmates, he said, was convicted of doing the same thing with an infant daughter. Although in this case, that sounds like it's probably in her case, that was her fetish or whatever you want to call it. But these women were doing it just to please this one guy.
Yeah. I mean, it was, there was, they didn't seem, I guess they just didn't have some sort of rationale in their minds that what they were doing was wrong. I mean, I don't, as far as I'm aware, it was just these two women. However, he was, he tried cultivating more women. Even after he was put into prison, he's been cultivating female fans with children. So, it's like he's never going to quit. If he ever gets out, God forbid, because he is eligible for parole when he's in his 50s. That's a bit scary.
So I have a question that I want to ask you, and then maybe see what Erin, because I don't think in all my time knowing Erin, I don't think I've asked her this either. So I'm going to ask you first, and then we'll ask Erin and see if she has any thoughts on this. But you would be a good person to ask because of you've done such extensive work on true crime and have talked to so many different authors. So what is it? What is the appeal with true crime? And is there something we can say about the type of people that are into true crime? Do you have any ideas about that?
I think this is something that's bandied about constantly. Like, why do people like true crime? Why do women like true crime? And there's just so many analyses and everybody chiming in on it. I honestly don't know what to say. I don't know. People just seem to gravitate toward it. I didn't even realize that I liked it, except then when I started to do it, I suddenly realized that I'd been watching things like from childhood, all these like news magazine shows on TV, which now they call true crime series. They weren't called that then, but like 48 Hours and 2020, and most of those things that they cover are true crime stories. So here it is. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I do like true crime.
Erin, what do you think? Do you have any thoughts on why people are drawn to it?
Honestly, I can tell you why I am.
Yeah.
Well, I know that you and I have spoken about this in not these terms before, but we've had the what's your case discussion. The what's the case that got you really, really drawn into true crime. And I know I told you it was Taylor's case and we had the episode about her, but lately I've been doing a lot of thinking about what I used to read and look at when I was younger. And it's kind of sad. I actually have been into it for way, way longer than I thought. And I used to be ashamed of it. I used to be a little bit, I used to think I was a little bit strange and weird for being so fascinated by this stuff, especially as, a teenager.
Yeah.
Like, your parents, like, obviously, my daughter's 8. In 10 years, I would really, really hope that she would not love to read, true crime books and watch Dateline every weekend instead of going out with her friends. But here we are. Like, that's me. I was watching, like my husband is saying in the comments, big fan of Unsolved Mysteries and Rescue 911. Like, this was the stuff that was out there, and yeah, I thought maybe it was me and that I was a creep, but it turns out I'm actually way more normal than I thought. So in summation, I think it's mostly just wanting to get your mind around why. It's always
trying to find out what's making people tick,
Yes. Yeah.
But actually, if I might add something to that, true crime, and I just actually turned in a paragraph to somebody who's doing a big blog for the Crime Writers Association in the UK, of which I'm a member. But true crime isn't this awful, bloodthirsty, gory genre anymore. I mean, there might still be people doing work like that, but I think most contemporary true crime writers are giving a lot more substantive content now. I mean, they're framing the story in a context of how these cases affect the victims and how they affect society, and even how they might even affect the law or change laws. So there's a lot more going on now in true crime. And I think it's a very legitimate genre as it's being done by the majority of true crime writers now.
I think actually, Erin, that was a really good point. I never thought about it that way, but the fact that a lot of people felt self-conscious about being drawn to these stories, and then now that it's okay, that explains why it's so explosive, because all of a sudden, all those people that were just waiting, now all of a sudden it's okay to go out and look at it,
Yeah.
Just Mitzi, just quickly, my theory on it has actually always been, it's a little bit, seems a little bit ironic, but to me, the people that most seem to be drawn to true crime, and explains why it's probably more women than men, are ironically more empathetic. And you would say, well, why would somebody empathetic be drawn to these kind of things? Because it involves such human suffering. And I just think that people that are empathetic are drawn to being connected to people. And so when they go through these cases, even though it's a terrible experience of the victim, they still feel that kind of connection to them. I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah. Well, I think that also applies to the people who write true crime, or at least write it successfully. There has to be some kind of empathy, and it just can't be a glorification, say, of a serial killer, because that's just in a way true crime porn. These are real people, that even the protagonists, the killers or the rapists or the whatever they are, the criminals, they are real people, but the victims are real people, and you need to approach it in that way, and try to balance it and try to find a reason. I mean, in the case of Ian Watkins, other than the drugs, I could not find a reason for what he did, or any kind of way to excuse what he did. But I think when you look at a lot of criminals, you can find some sort of seed there that maybe sent them off in that direction into the darkness.
I mean, a lot of the more famous ones. I'm just putting up your website for anybody that would like to. This is a really good website for, if you're looking for like an author's website, this is one of the better ones you'll see.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that, because I've done it myself.
Really nicely set up.
I'll see if I can scroll a little bit for people. And this is, can your book be pre-ordered now yet? Or is it too early? The one.
Yeah. Women Who Murder is available for pre-order, and as I said, it's coming out on Valentine's Day, I think it is, and then in the UK it comes out a month later for some reason.
Oh, wow. Valentine's Day. Very clever.
Yeah, Valentine's Day. Women Who Murder. That's a perfect.
I like it.
Hey,
Yeah.
if your boyfriends are giving you problems, you get them that book.
That's a really good idea.
Thanks, guys.
And
I
for-
did
and for
want to
the-
add something quick, Kev,
Yeah.
if you don't mind.
No, please, please.
What you said about empathy actually set the wheels going. I know you and I have talked about this pretty extensively in the last couple of weeks, but Mitzi, I'm sure you don't know because it's not out yet, but I've been working on an episode about the Molly Bish case out of Warren, Massachusetts. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No, I'm not offhand.
She was 16, almost 17 years old, and disappeared from a very remote pond in Warren, Massachusetts. She was working as a lifeguard at the pond. She showed up for work one day, and there was like a 10 or 15-minute window between the time she was dropped off and the time that the first kids showed up to swim, and she was just gone. All her stuff was there, her shoes were there, but she was gone. So I've been looking into this case because I've been wanting to do a story about it since, I joined Kev. It was one of the bucket list items that I wanted to do. And in preparation for the episode that I'm making, I went to Warren and I walked that walk. I walked to the beach. I stood where she stood, and the amount of insight I feel like I got to the place itself, the remoteness of it, the feeling of it, it can't be described in words without seeing it. So, I mean, the empathy, yes, but it's also, it's more consuming than that. It's more visceral than that. Like, if you have a chance to really like put yourself where a person was and understand what they saw, what they heard, what they smelled, all of it, and make it an experience, then it just really, it adds a layer as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I feel like I have way more insight into how and why. Well, not why, but like, how than I did before I went there. So it's one of those, like, it's more than reading something. It's more than watching something. It's wanting to understand the totality of it.
No, I know what you're saying. I mean, I did that for one of my stories as well, and just to sort of went to this guy's street and just got and passed all the places where these shootings happened, and in a way, it's almost surreal though too.
Yeah.
Like, because you see it like right now, and you can't imagine that this happened. It's just it's also normal, and I mean, people say that all the time, I guess. But
no, but I mean, people are going about their lives all around you while you're standing there trying to understand this horrible thing that happened in that exact place.
Yeah,
it's like how I felt when we went to the pool, Kev.
Yeah.
It's the same sort
That's
of.
before you fell in the river, or after?
Yes, actually after as well, but yes.
You sound as bad as
he
me.
was baptized by the devil's minions. Is that what you said? God.
We were
Never gonna
doing
live
an
it down.
investigative shoot, and Erin slipped down a slippery bank into the river and was about half under, and then tried to get out and slid all the way down. And then it got a little scary, but
A woman after my heart. That's exactly the kind of thing that would happen to me.
she was trying to get a picture. She was trying to
Yeah,
get
oh,
that
Of
perfect
course.
picture.
I did get the picture. So
She did,
I got
yeah.
the picture.
Yeah.
And it better go in the
you look
documentary.
upside
because
down in the photo with your leg in the air.
I was leaning on a tree and I had a branch in my hand, and I got the picture and then got too cocky and just.
So, it's funny. I've talked about this before on the channel, but considering we do mostly true crime, this is somewhat ironic, but I actually have never been into true crime. And now I consider myself to be just regular, like in the middle on the empathy scale. Okay. But it's enough that I found true crime to be kind of icky. Like, it was like, you look through the horrible acts of man and you end up like, oh man, I'd just rather go watch an old episode of Seinfeld, you know. But where I am drawn in, and this is where it's different for everybody, is the unsolved cases. If I can kind of stand back and try to, and I'm applying myself to a problem of trying to understand it and figure it out, then I kind of distance that part of my brain that is feeling what the victims went through. And then now I'm hooked because I'm trying to figure out what happened. I don't.
Yeah. Well, actually, the book that came out before the Crimes of Famous and Infamous Criminals is Unsolved Crimes and Mysteries. So, so it was inevitable I was going to do one of those as well. But
in my Kindle library.
Well, the biggest challenge there is you hope that it's not all solved by the time the book's published.
That's right. They usually aren't, though. Usually these unsolved ones stay that way.
You mentioned about the icky part, but I mean, on the icky scale, I'm very much aware of that, and I have curtailed some writers who I'm saying, well, you know, there's enough information, and I think we need to kind of trim it a bit because, you know, we don't want to put off readers. You know, we give them enough information, but we don't need to put in every horrendous, you know, detail, which, like on the icky scale, I had to be really careful of that with my own story because it just would have been too much.
Yeah. With your own, what do you mean your own? Oh, you mean the story that you covered?
The Ian Watkins one. Yeah.
What's another story that you've written? That's the only one that I've read because I have that particular book, and that was the only one you had in that book, but you've had other ones. So.
Oh God, yeah. Let me see.
Well, what was the one you felt most drawn to? What was the one you just felt the best about writing about?
God, you know, it's like, not to make a band reference again, but you know, when you ask a band what's their favorite album that they've done, and it's always the most recent one. So it's sort of, and now that I've turned in another book, the Women Who Murder book, it's that story is the one that's sort of sticking in my mind the most, as you know, the most affected one. But you know, I've done some that are lighter. Okay, like for Unsolved Crimes and Mysteries, I wrote about the actor who played in Eraserhead and his death, which was technically unsolved, and that's obviously not an icky story, you know. And Partners in Crime, I wrote about a husband and wife team in London who were bringing women over from Hungary for their to do sex work out of a very posh block of flats in Kensington. The story is called 10 Floors of Whores. That's not my title. That was what they nicknamed the building.
That's a really good title.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's this block of flats that has a reputation, and despite the fact the owner claimed he didn't know this was going on. So this was this husband and wife team. The woman was actually Hungarian. Her husband was British, and he was a police constable. And it ended up being a sex trafficking case because, you know, it's, even though these women were sex workers in Hungary and came to England to be sex workers, it's illegal to bring someone from another country over to do sex work. It's trafficking.
Right.
But that was an interesting story as well. And I don't know, that this was going on. This was going on for how long, and the advertising, and you know, newspapers and whatnot, and you know, it was all a story of just this couple was greedy. They wanted nice things. They wanted to buy whatever they wanted and splurge. And you know, people in the neighborhood seeing all these parcels arriving, saying, "Well, these people don't seem to work. How do they have all this stuff coming?"
Yeah. So their motive, they had a clear motive. Their motive was not sexual.
Yeah, it was a financial motive. They didn't care about the women, and you know, the women were exploited. They were misled. I mean, some of them, you know, went back because it was so horrible that, you know, by the time they were paid by their pimps, because I mean, these people were pimps. It just wasn't even worth it. They're like, why did we leave Hungary?
Would you be spoiling anything if you gave us a taste by one story from the upcoming book?
Okay, well, I can tell you the one I wrote. It's about Iran's first known female serial killer.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it was a woman?
A woman. And that was really good to write. It was challenging to write because obviously researching it, most of the materials in Farsi. I don't speak or read Farsi. So, getting translations. There were actually some people I was able to speak to in Tehran via email with some questions, and that was helpful. And but yeah, that was a challenge. That was a real challenge to do, even with like such a thing that you think dates would be a problem, because they use a different calendar in Iran. And so sometimes you'll see different dates or a different year, and it's like, oh my, well, when was it?
So wow, I think it's worth buying the book. Just so the book is called Women Who Murder, and it's coming out on Valentine's Day in this country, anyways.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth getting it just for that story. Can you tell us any more about it? I mean, it's such an oppressed country.
I really liked this story because first, when I was looking to do something interesting, I always try to do something interesting, and I always try to find something that's a bit off the beaten track. And Iran is a bit off the beaten track, and so I came across the case, and my first thought from just reading what small amount I was able to read was that this is just this woman just went out and murdered these other women and stole their jewelry. But as I started to research it deeper and deeper and deeper, as one does when you're doing true crime, I got a very different perspective on this woman, and it was really a woman who was, well, she was driven to desperation financially just because she had an unemployed husband who was a drug addict. Unfortunately, Iran has, I believe, the highest drug addiction in the world, which is
really
pretty sad.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And she had a daughter who was disabled with, I think, cystic fibrosis. I can't remember offhand, so pardon me if I screwed that up. And she needed money for her medical treatment and therapy and et cetera, et cetera. And she just got into a deep hole. She was ripped off left and right, took out a loan that didn't exist. And so she just needed to come up with some way to get money. And how she did that was she targeted older women who were wearing a lot of gold jewelry.
Wow.
Yeah.
So she had a motive then. Again, it was financial. So it wasn't like the typical serial killer that's doing it for the pleasure of killing.
No, there was nothing about any kind of pleasure in killing. It does not sound to me that there was any pleasure whatsoever in what she was doing. No.
It's still fascinating because in a culture where women are so repressed, to the idea of a woman emerging as a serial killer in that environment seems particularly unique.
Yeah. But also then you're also in a society that is more trusting too, which is what made it so easy for her to find victims. Because, say you offer some older woman a ride home and, well, sure, you get in a car with someone, you don't think twice about it. And, that obviously here in the West, we would look askance at taking a ride from a stranger, but, there's still a bit more. It's not that bad there, except for the victims of this woman, obviously.
Yeah. So Mitzi, actually, we're in the middle of launching a brand new YouTube channel, which is related to true crime, but a little bit different. So I'd like your professional opinion of it. So it's going to be called Missing in the USA. And we're putting together a team. And just the idea is along this idea of, we wanted to do more that highlight the problem of victims or put their story more in play, So what we will do is contact families of someone that's been missing, not someone that was missing 20 years ago, but some, where there's a more reasonable chance where they might still be alive, and just try to really find out all the details about that person. What were their dreams, and maybe if something went wrong, what went wrong, or just really kind of humanize that person so that it really gives people a sense. And if possible, the family members we won't do it unless they want us to. And so obviously they're going to give us pictures and information and stuff like that, and hopefully come on and be interviewed on some of these shows too. Do you think there might be something worthwhile there?
I think so. I mean, a lot of, true crime sometimes solves cases, getting the attention for cases and whatnot. And I mean, this sounds like something that people would be engaged with, but it also sounds like a valuable resource to potentially find these people. And obviously anything that's going to help in that regard. Yeah, sounds good to me.
Yeah, even if we get just like one victory really is enough. But if you eventually got it going where every once in a while you find somebody, it seems like, I took out a little bit of an ad and I got a good response to it. I was looking for kind of co-hosts and researchers and stuff like that. But, shows a need, though. There were actually 3 or 4 people that contacted me wanting to help find their loved one. And I had to say, I'm not an investigator. I don't have the resources or the skills to do that kind of thing. The best I could do was offer them to come on the channel and talk about their loved one. But it was, there's a lot of people out there, I think, in that situation who just haven't given up hope on somebody,
Yeah. I mean, it's just sad the amount of people that just disappear. I mean, I know there's been a lot of recent conversation too about Indigenous women. In Canada, it's been more out there about all the Indigenous women who go missing or are found murdered. But in the United States, that's also getting more attention now. And it's apparently quite an epidemic.
Where are you located right now?
I'm in the Pacific Northwest, so we have a lot of tribes out here.
Okay, so I wasn't sure. You grew up in England though, and now you're in Pacific Northwest. Okay.
Yeah. Between Canada and the U.S., so I mean, there's sort of we're all blended together.
Yeah, and we've learned here too. It's never a good idea to make your address too specific in some of the things that we cover. So.
Well, actually, funny enough, when I started on true crime, my friend who I referenced earlier, the retired police captain, he was sort of worried. He says, "Well, I don't know, you might start getting some kind of weirdos after you or threats." And I'm like, well, hopefully not. But I've actually only had nice people. I even I even had an email from the former barber of a serial killer from California who said, "Oh, I know so and so. He loves your book."
Wow.
Wait a minute. So the barber was the person who you messaged.
The barber emailed me at my website domain just to say hello and say, "Oh, I was his barber, and we still chat." I
so
guess
the killer's still alive then.
Yeah, he's in the federal penitentiary.
And he reads your books.
Well, the story
awesome.
was actually do you know Christian Cipollini?
No.
Well, he's big on mob crime, and this particular killer was a mob hitman. So, so Christian did the story, and then he sent the guy a copy of the book. He couldn't give it to him because I guess you can't actually do that, but I think they can take an Amazon order or something and get that. So I've got all these photos of El Mano Negro holding up the book, and he's in his prison garb.
That's wow.
I love the mafia
He's
genre.
not contacted me yet. I haven't had an email from him yet.
We actually did, this is before your time, Erin, but we did an episode here on somebody who is currently serving in jail for life from the Philadelphia mob, and he was hoping to get a new trial. So he had somebody reach out to us and give us the arguments as to why he's innocent. And it was funny because he didn't claim to be innocent in general. He's admitted to being what he is, but he's innocent of that particular crime, that's reasonable.
Yeah, I mean that's true. That's true. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, is it really fair to say, well, all right, he probably did something somewhere or other. We'll just lock him up for this one. I'm not really sure.
No, that's not. You hope it doesn't work that way. So that's really good. All right. So is there anything else you want to go over, or anything else you're working on that you're excited about that you'd like to discuss with us? Or
well, we've already plugged the new book, the Valentine's Day special, Women Who Murder. No, not at the moment. I've got a couple of irons in the fire for possible anthologies, maybe fiction again. I'm sort of I'm dying to get back into fiction, which is why I keep trying to get my novel written. But that's really about it, I think.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great. Well, you've been a great guest. And so what we hope to do actually is, because we've had with the main author that's come on here, Dave, what helped him sell books was people seeing him live over and over again. They built that connection. So we're hoping we can use that to trick you into coming back, even if it's only just for a shorter amount of time, so we don't have to drain you for an hour. But if you come on for 10 minutes sometime, if there's some relevant case that we are exploring that's similar to something that you've done, maybe we'll be able to get you come on for 5 or 10 minutes and comment on it. And hopefully
I'm fine with that. I mean, I appreciate being given a venue to kind of say my thing and plug my books and talk about true crime. So certainly.
Okay, excellent.
Awesome.
And maybe we'll be able to find something for you, a topic in the missing channel too, that might be useful for one of your future books.
Sure, or the Unsolved Crimes and Mysteries one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think we got some missing people in that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, quite a few.
Well, it's been great to have you. Erin, is there anything you wanted to ask Mitzi before we?
Oh, tons of things.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
mostly
I'm not trying to rush you guys.
No, mostly offline. Mostly offline.
Oh, offline. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Offline. That's sounding ominous already.
We're gonna have to have a pay channel so that people can watch the offline.
Yeah.
No, I did want to say actually though that you and I have a friend in common.
We do.
One of the authors that wrote in one of your anthologies, his name is Joe Turner.
Joe, I love Joe.
Yeah, he agreed to come on with us to discuss the Danny LaPlante case out of Pepperell, Massachusetts. So yeah, working on that one too. So
yeah, Joe's been with me since almost the beginning.
Couldn't be a nicer guy either.
Oh no, and he's really good. I mean, he's good with his work. He's prompt when you need something from him, or need a change or you need something. No, he's really professional too. Great guy.
Yep, and the poor guy has had to give me one piece of bad news after another about getting case records on that case, and he's so courteous and professional about it. And he's like, God, I hate this. Every time I talk to you, I'm giving you bad news, but here's some more. Let's pile it on. So yeah.
I know, but he's so nice. You can't fault him.
Yeah. I can't wait to discuss this case with him. It's going to be really, really great. So
he's done some Facebook Lives with me. I think he's probably been on with me 3 times already.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, so you can find those videos, check them out so you can see. If you haven't talked to Joe like face to face, at least you'll see him.
Oh, I can't wait.
Are you familiar, Mitzi, with the Danny LaPlante case that Erin's talking about?
Yeah, he told me about that early on when he was working on that.
His passion project. Yep.
Yeah, that's so creepy.
The guy in the walls.
No. I know. I live in the area, so I've driven by the house.
Oh God.
It's so funny. Like this whole story, you're hearing about it and you're reading it and you're trying to picture it in your head because there's no photographs, there's no, video, there's nothing like that. And you're just thinking to yourself, like, how big could this spot be? It must be a really old house, and the gears are turning. And then I drove by the house and I was like, that's a split level from the 70s. Where is this guy hiding in there? It's just not what I pictured at all, but it gave me a little bit more insight. Just, so
now you're going to be like listening with a glass at the drywall to hear if there's anything in there.
just to make sure.
Do I hear anything?
So creepy. I love that story though.
Okay. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much. And we have this Friday, we're going to be we've been doing mostly true crime, Mitzi, but on Friday, we're doing something a little more. Just on Fridays, we started about a month ago with paranormal ghost stories, just anything that's a good story, and which maybe as a writer, you can, that's for me, I'm not a believer in that stuff. I keep an open mind, but it's more, I'm a writer, so I like any good story. So we decided the topic for this week will be possessions. So Erin's and we're all gonna research some true possessions, some of the more famous ones in history, and we'll talk about that. And we have a lot of other stuff in the works, but we promise to have you back if you'll come with us.
Absolutely.
Everybody, have a good night. Thank you very much, and we'll see you Friday.
Thanks. Mitzi.